Yet, when was the last time you heard the chairman of the Federal Reserve mention it? When was the last time a president stood at a podium and reassured the public about the nation's stockpile of it? The answer is never. They do not talk about silver. They treat it as if it simply does not exist in the financial realm. They treat it like a base industrial commodity, like copper, or zinc, or iron. But silver is not just an industrial commodity. For 5,000 years, it was the primary medium of exchange for the working class. It is mentioned in ancient texts, it built empires, and it was the very foundation of the United States monetary system. So why the sudden amnesia? Why has the most utilized monetary metal in human history been completely erased from the official government narrative? Today, we're going to expose the deliberate, century-long campaign to demote silver. We will look at how the United States government quietly drained its own massive stockpiles, why acknowledging silver today would instantly bankrupt the green energy and military-industrial complexes, and why their silence is the absolute best buy signal you will ever receive. To understand why governments ignore silver today, we must first understand how they actively assassinated it in the past. It was not an accident. It was a highly coordinated financial coup. When the United States was founded, the Constitution explicitly stated that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin at tender in payment of debts. The original U.S. dollar was defined not by gold, but by a specific weight of silver, 371.25 grains of pure silver, to be exact. Silver was the money of the people. It was abundant enough to facilitate daily trade for farmers, merchants, and the working class, ensuring that the average citizen had access to hard, uninflatable currency. But the banking elite hated the bimetallic standard. Why? Because when the public has access to an abundant, decentralized hard currency like silver, they do not need to rely heavily on banks for credit. Silver gave the working class financial independence. The large international financiers, primarily based in Europe and the northeastern United States, wanted a strict gold standard. Gold was rarer, easier for central banks to hoard and monopolize, and it constrained the money supply in a way that forced the working class to borrow paper money at interest. This culminated in the Coinage Act of 1873. It was pushed through Congress quietly. The act officially ended the minting of the standard silver dollar, effectively stripping silver of its legal tender status for large debts and forcing the United States onto a de facto gold standard. At the time, the public was so outraged that they literally named this legislative maneuver the crime of 1873. This single act of legislation was the beginning of the end for silver as official government money. It caused massive deflation, wiped out farmers who could no longer pay their debts with silver, and consolidated the control of the money supply into the hands of the Wall Street banking cartel. From that moment on, the official narrative began to shift. The government spent the next century slowly conditioning the public to view gold as the only true monetary reserve, and to view silver merely as pocket change or a manufacturing input. They didn't just stop using it. They systematically erased its monetary prestige from the public consciousness. The second reason governments refuse to talk about silver is deeply embarrassing for them. It is a matter of pure inventory. You do not brag about a bank account that is overdrawn, and you do not talk about a strategic reserve that you have completely squandered. There was a time when the United States government was the absolute, undisputed king of silver. In the middle of the 20th century, the U.S. Treasury held a staggering stockpile of over 3 billion ounces of physical silver. 3 billion. It was the largest concentration of wealth of its kind in human history. But what did they do with it? They wasted it. They used massive amounts of it for the Manhattan Project during World War II, literally using silver wiring to build the electromagnets that enriched uranium, because copper was in short supply. They continued to mint billions of silver quarters, dimes, and half dollars until the mid-1960s. When the global price of silver began to rise due to inflation, the metal content in a silver quarter became worth more than its 25-cent face value. The public started melting the coins down. To stop the bleeding, the U.S. government passed the Coinage Act of 1965, completely removing silver from circulating currency and replacing it with cheap, worthless metals like copper and nickel. Over the following decades, the government continuously sold off its remaining strategic stockpile to suppress the price and feed the growing industrial demand of the technology sector. They dumped their physical wealth onto the market to keep the paper illusion alive. By the early 2000s, the United States' strategic silver stockpile was entirely depleted. Gone. Zero. Today, in 2026, the U.S. Treasury still claims to hold over 8,000 tons of gold. But they hold virtually no physical silver. They even have to buy silver on the open market just to mint the American Silver Eagle coins that they sell to the public. This is why they do not talk about it. If a central banker goes on television today and acknowledges that silver is a vital monetary asset, the first question a journalist will ask is, "So, how much of it do we own?" The answer is none. By keeping silver out of the conversation, governments avoid exposing one of the most catastrophic mismanagement of national wealth in modern history. The third reason is deeply tied to the geopolitical and economic realities we face today. In February 2026, the world is locked in two massive races: the transition to green energy and the acceleration of military-capable artificial intelligence. Both of these global agendas require unimaginable quantities of physical silver. Solar panels require silver pastes to capture the sun's energy. Tomahawk cruise missiles, autonomous drones, and advanced radar systems require high-purity silver for their critical circuitry to prevent failure under extreme conditions. The hyperscale data centers powering the AI revolution rely on silver to prevent thermal meltdowns. Now, let's look at the actual market. We just witnessed an incredibly violent manipulation in January 2026. The physical shortage finally forced the paper price of silver to spike to $121 an ounce. It was a terrifying glimpse into true price discovery. But within weeks, the COMEX exchange drastically raised margin requirements, and institutional short sellers dumped billions in synthetic paper contracts to smash the price back down to the $80 range, where it sits today. Why was this takedown necessary? Because if governments and central banks officially declare that silver is a scarce, vital monetary asset, the entire industrial facade collapses. If the President of the United States were to publicly announce that silver is a critical strategic vulnerability and that citizens should hold it as a store of value, the resulting investment demand would overwhelm the paper shorts instantly. The price wouldn't just go back to $121, it would blow past $300 an ounce. If silver hits $300 an ounce, the cost of manufacturing an electric vehicle skyrockets. The multi-trillion-dollar green energy budgets passed by Congress become economically unviable. The cost of producing a guided missile doubles. The entire infrastructure of the 21st century economy relies on the absolute illusion that silver is cheap and abundant. By refusing to talk about silver, the government allows Wall Street to continue its paper manipulation. Silence is their weapon of price suppression. They cannot afford to let the public view silver as money, because if the public starts hoarding it in their safes, the factories and the defense contractors will starve. They are sacrificing your financial independence to subsidize the industrial complex. The final and perhaps most terrifying reason governments refuse to acknowledge silver is because it represents the exact opposite of the financial future they are building for you. In 2026, the rollout of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, is no longer a conspiracy theory. It is a mechanical reality. Through networks like FedNow, governments are establishing a system where every transaction is digital, programmable, and entirely monitored. They want a society where your ability to buy food, travel, or donate to a cause is dependent on your compliance with government algorithms. In this new paradigm, physical cash is the enemy, and they are actively phasing it out. Gold is a fantastic way to escape this system, but let's be realistic. At $5,000 an ounce, gold is a tool for preserving major wealth. If you need to buy groceries off the grid, or pay a mechanic to fix your car without the transaction being flagged by a central bank server, a $5,000 gold coin is practically useless. It is simply too valuable for daily commerce. Silver, however, is the perfect antidote to the digital Panopticon. It is the ultimate anti-CBDC. A single, 1-ounce silver coin, currently sitting around $80, is the perfect denomination for peer-to-peer, untraceable trade. It is physical, it is recognizable, and it requires no electricity or internet connection to settle a transaction. It is the money of the parallel economy. If governments talk about silver, they legitimize it. If they admit that silver is a reliable store of value and a valid medium of exchange, they provide the masses with an escape route from the digital dollar. They want you trapped in the banking grid, holding depreciating digital tokens that they can inflate or freeze at the push of a button. They do not want you holding decentralized, physical money that gives you autonomy. Their silence is not born of ignorance, it is born of fear. They know exactly what silver is. They know that if the working and middle classes collectively swap their vulnerable fiat currency for physical silver, the power dynamic of the state completely collapses. The greatest financial maneuvers in history are never broadcast on the evening news. By the time the government and the mainstream media start talking about an asset, the massive gains have already been made by the insiders, and the trap has been set for the retail investor. The fact that the government refuses to talk about silver is the most bullish fundamental indicator you can possibly find. It proves that the market is suppressed. It proves that the metal is strategically vital. And it proves that they are terrified of a mass physical accumulation by the public. We are living in an era of historical deception. The gold price has already shown us the weakness of the dollar, but the silver price is showing us the desperation of the industrial complex. They knocked it down from $121 back to $80 because they had to. But paper manipulation cannot mine physical metal out of the ground. The COMEX vaults are draining. The physical deficit is widening every single day. Do not wait for the chairman of the Federal Reserve to give you permission to protect your wealth. Do not wait for a press conference that will never happen. Take advantage of their silence. Take advantage of this temporary, manipulated price suppression, because when the physical shortage finally shatters the paper market, the price discovery will be instantaneous, and you will not have time to buy in. Are you preparing for the digital cage, or are you acquiring the money of the parallel economy? Let me know your strategy in the comments below.